You probably have a favorite superhero, but do you have a favorite version of your favorite superhero? Marvel Comics love introducing powered-up alternate versions of its main characters just to give them a little extra juice. And today I'm talking about the most powerful versions of Marvel's strongest heroes. Like, is Maestro the strongest version of Hulk? Is Spider-Man with the Enigma Force the most powerful version of that character? What about the version of Thor that merged with the Phoenix Force? Man, there are so many forces. Let's talk more about these characters right now. Thor is obviously one of the strongest heroes in the Marvel Universe already. He's proven time and time again that when you need a heavy hitter, he's the one you should call. Or I guess he's the one you should email? Yeah, he doesn't own a computer, so I guess getting a hold of him is difficult. You just kinda have to hope he shows up where you need him to. Anyways, so there's Thor, then there's Old King Phoenix Thor, and you can bet your bottom dollar this version of Thor is the strongest version of the character. In fact, he's one of the strongest characters in all of the Marvel Universe. If you couldn't guess from the name, this is a version of the God of Thunder that has successfully merged with the Phoenix Force in a storyline that saw the hero trying to beat an all-powerful version of Doctor Doom. Pairing Thor with the Phoenix Force is practically unfair. Both of them are already super strong on their own. They don't need each other to become stronger, at least normally. This whole storyline was a special circumstance. Spider-Man is a fun hero because he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man dealing with street-level threats, but he's also often drawn into battles with all sorts of mystical entities and cosmic beings. He just works practically in any story. And there have been a lot of strong versions of Spider-Man over the years. Like the Spider-Man with a bunch of extra arms? Yeah, how you gonna beat that, huh? Try blocking a punch and boom, another punch comes your way. But besides multi-armed Spidey, there's also a version of the character who was permanently fused with the Enigma Force, one of those all-powerful cosmic entities like the Phoenix Force I just mentioned. The original timeline had our Peter Parker merge with the Enigma Force briefly before giving it up. But a later comic showed a different universe version of Spider-Man who had never made that choice. I mean, if you stay the cosmic Spider-Man, then your little problems like having to deal with paying rent or J. Jonah Jameson slandering your name sound like small potatoes. And he just looks awesome. It's a shame that this didn't last very long. In the Spider-Verse storyline, we see Enigma Force Spider-Man, but he was quickly beaten by Solus and his spider essence was consumed. Bummer. The reason I find Hulk so fascinating is how complex the different versions of the character can be. Hulk himself is so straightforward in initial concept. He's a normal man who, when he gets angry, loses control and turns into a hulking beast. But Marvel Comics have done a great job in expanding the lore behind the character and making Bruce Banner and his alter ego one of the most fascinating and strongest characters in Marvel Comics. And there are a surprising amount of different, stronger versions of Hulk out there that this one is tough to choose. Red Hulk, Grey Hulk, Worldbreaker Hulk, all of those are worthy contenders, but I wanted to take this entry and choose Maestro as the strongest version of the Hulk out there right now. This version is stronger, more intelligent, and infinitely more ruthless than a lot of his counterparts. He's an alternate future version of the Hulk, and when our regular Hulk has to face him, he almost doesn't win. Maestro is terrifying because he's so powerful and also super smart. Sometimes you don't get that balance in your different Hulk versions. And the real reason why I chose Maestro for this entry was to say that I think Maestro would be an excellent villain in a standalone Hulk MCU movie. I know it's a long shot and the rights are super complicated, but Hulk is one of the most underserved characters in the MCU, and he deserves his own solo movie at this point. Captain America is great on his own, but let's be real, he's not the strongest hero around. Like, yeah, he's a great leader and one of the best hand-to-hand fighters in the MCU, but if you had to put him up against characters like Thor or Hulk in a strength contest, then you'd probably bet on Thor and Hulk. But there's one version of Captain America that's a little more unique than normal, and I'm talking about the Soldier Supreme. This was during the Warp World storyline, which basically happened because Gamora used the Infinity Gems to fold the universe in half, and a lot of characters were merged together. So Captain America was fused with Doctor Strange, and the rest is history. And it wasn't just a merging of powers, but also backstories. Like in this reality, Steven Rogers did undergo the super soldier serum treatment, but its ingredients consisted of magical properties, so it ended up giving Steven Rogers the power of sorcery. So this had cool combinations, like Steve being an expert super soldier leader extraordinaire like normal, but also did things like helped him use spells to create a magical shield to use against his opponents. I think because of this merge, it gave Cap the most powerful version of himself. There's a lot of different powerful versions of Iron Man out there, but the one I want to talk about is Superior Iron Man. Yes, you have your versions of Tony Stark that have suits so powerful they can break the cosmos or things like that, but the reason I chose the Superior Iron Man is to show what can happen if Tony wasn't a good guy. Tony Stark has always been a hero who tries to do the right thing, but has often made some terrible decisions on top of his ego and arrogance. So imagine a version of the character that has those personality characteristics, but had the intent of controlling the world in his image. Yeah, that version of Iron Man is the most powerful to me. Superior Iron Man is everything we love about our normal Iron Man, but just working on the side of evil, which highlights just how thin the line is between good Tony and evil Tony. I also wanted to bring this up because I think Superior Iron Man would make an excellent threat in a future MCU movie. Maybe this version comes from a different universe and he's trying to protect his own universe from destruction during Kang's eventual wrath. Every so often, Marvel and DC work together for fun and wacky crossovers, and this has led to the strongest version of Doctor Strange imaginable. So Doctor Strange is the big magic user over in the Marvel universe, and over on the DC side of things, his counterpart is Dr. Fate, about to make waves in live action in the upcoming Black Adam movie played by Pierce Brosnan. So in this warped universe crossover, Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate merged into one to become Doctor Strange Fate. Now that's already pretty cool, right? Well, for an added bit of awesomeness, Doctor Strange Fate isn't Stephen Strange or Kent Nelson, but rather it's Charles Xavier. That's right, on top of being a powerful sorcerer with elements of both Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate, this hero also has telepathy mutant abilities. So he's a genius, he's a surgeon, he's an occultist, he's a martial artist, he has the helmet of Strange Fate, he can just do it all. That's basically three of the most powerful heroes across all comic universes smushed together into one powerful hero. Okay, I'm gonna be honest here. The strongest version possible of Wolverine is the one that absorbed the Phoenix Force. But I already talked about Thor merging with the Phoenix Force at the start of this list, so I don't want to just retread about what makes the Phoenix Force super powerful. So I'm gonna choose another version of Wolverine that I think is the most powerful second version. There's a good amount to choose from. I could say Old Man Logan, I could say Laura Kinney, who is a Logan clone who's stronger, I could even say the Earth 12025 version of Wolverine who has an adamantine-coated skeleton, which is a mystical metal that gods from Olympus use, but nope, I'm not gonna say any of those chumps. I'm going with Lord of the Vampires Wolverine. That's right, Vampire Wolverine, baby. This was in a What If comic and followed a storyline where Dracula bit Wolverine, Logan turned and then eliminated Dracula and thereby became the Lord of the Vampires himself. What followed was a bloody rampage where Wolverine, now equipped with classic vampire hypnotic powers, started basically a war with New York, taking a lot of the X-Men out in the process. Oh shoot. Remember how I just said I didn't want to choose Wolverine with the Phoenix Force because I had already talked about Thor with the Phoenix Force and I didn't want to repeat myself? Well, I'm a big hypocrite. Because I'm talking about the Enigma Force again, making another Spider-Man hero a Captain Universe version. I just wanted to talk about Wolverine as a vampire, okay? Okay, anyways, Miles Morales also fused with the Enigma Force to become a Captain Universe, granting him all kinds of cosmic energy. I'm bringing this up because I wanted to pose the age-old question between which version of Spider-Man do you prefer, Peter Parker or Miles Morales? If their versions of Captain Universe fought, who would win? Well, given everything we saw Miles Morales do with the Enigma Force and the Captain Universe moniker, I kinda gotta go with him, right? A common theme that's becoming apparent on this list is that a character who gets infused with cosmic powers basically becomes the strongest version of themselves, and that's what happened with Ghost Rider. I mean, Ghost Rider by himself already is a hero who can melt your face off just by looking at you, so he's already scary. But then there's a version out there that fused with the power cosmic and became Galactus's new herald. Talk about a power overload. So what happened was this. This takes place in a Thanos-centric comic, in an alternate timeline where Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, died, but then made a deal with Mephisto that allowed him to bond with the Spirit of Vengeance to become the new Ghost Rider. Cool, right? No. Because he came back to Earth with all of Earth wiped out. After a long time waiting around doing nothing, one thing led to another where Frank Castle Ghost Rider came across an injured Galactus and agreed to be his herald, and thus the Cosmic Ghost Rider was born. There's a ton of Deadpools to choose from when choosing the most powerful versions of the Merc with the Mouth. I could make a whole list about those guys, but I can only choose one to go on here. Decisions. Well, I'm actually going with Venompool. It's said that Venompool exists in the universe that the Beyonder loves partying in, and Venompool is a go-to party animal, which, yeah, isn't really a big surprise. But I like the Venompool combination because this could have been our main version of Deadpool at one point. We all know that Spider-Man found the Venom symbiote in the Secret Wars arc, and the rest is history. But it was revealed later in a fun retcon that right before Peter Parker stumbled upon the black goo, Deadpool found it first, and there was an almost merge there. But Deadpool's mind was too chaotic for the symbiote to handle, and it jumped ship. But what if it didn't? What if our Deadpool was always Venompool? Think of the mischief and the mayhem those two would get up to. I think the strongest version of Mr. Fantastic is the evil version of himself, aka the ultimate version. Just like the Tony Stark entry a bit earlier when a beloved and intelligent hero breaks bad and turns to the dark side, they prove just how lucky we are to have them on the side of good in our universe. The only downside to the ultimate version of Reed Richards is his villain name. He just goes by The Maker, which if we were ranking on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd give that a solid 3. Where's the menace or the gravitas? Anyways, lackluster name aside, the Maker is still one of the biggest threats in the Ultimate Universe. He's a version of Reed Richards with a few screws loose, and he's determined to usually control and or destroy everything. And he's come close a few times. There was one moment where, thanks to Molecule Man, the Maker could exist in every universe at once. A part of me was sorta hoping the Maker would be the version of Mr. Fantastic we saw in the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness movie. That way I'd feel less bad when Wanda turned him into spaghetti, but nope, that one seemed like a good enough guy. Too bad. Alright, I've talked about the Phoenix Force with Thor, and I've avoided it with Wolverine, but I didn't want to omit its most famous host. Jean Grey is obviously one of the most powerful telepathic mutants in the universe, and when she goes through her whole Phoenix Force avatar phase, it always causes serious headaches. So would you say the Jean Grey that's merged with the Phoenix Force is the character's most powerful version? Well, sort of, but not in the way that you expect. There's also the White Phoenix. You see, everyone knows the Dark Phoenix, which is basically a result of the host corrupting the Phoenix Force, and it turned Jean into one of the best Marvel villains for a short time. But what if a user did not corrupt the Phoenix Force, but rather merged and became one with it? Well, then you have the White Phoenix, and it's actually more powerful. Huh, who knew that working in tangent with something is better than working against something? I'd say I'd like to see the White Phoenix eventually, but we have to prove that we can do the Dark Phoenix saga in live action first, and that just hasn't worked out so far. When talking about Black Panther, I always think how, if he went to space instead of Star-Lord, he would have averted Infinity War and made the galaxy a better place, just with his general kingly attitude. So that could be the strongest version of the character, right? Not quite. My choice is the one that successfully used the Infinity Gauntlet to take on the god version of Doctor Doom in Secret Wars. The build-up to this was great. Doctor Doom was on a rampage, and Black Panther successfully found the Infinity Gauntlet, which would help even the odds. The fight was this massive display of power that Doom called basically a fight between two gods, and that's totally accurate. T'Challa doesn't come out on top here, but he proves himself more than worthy to battle this godlike Doctor Doom, and it makes the case that maybe Black Panther should just be given all the power all the time. Couldn't hurt that much. How do you improve on almost perfection? Captain Marvel is a hero that's specifically designed to be at her most powerful almost all the time. So is there any version of her that's more powerful than normal? Well, I'd argue yes. One time, Captain Marvel was captured by the Brood and experimented on because of her physiology. This led to them turning her into Binary, which was a being that could tap into the power of a white hole. So yeah, then Binary used those abilities to get revenge and totally wiped out the Brood. She remained a Binary for a bit before going back to Captain Marvel, so if you're thinking of ways Captain Marvel can grow in her upcoming movies, well, maybe Binary is the way to go. So She-Hulk is about to make her big MCU debut with her own Disney Plus TV show, so with that in mind, I wanted to end this list by talking about the most powerful version of Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk. And while there were some great options to pick from, I decided to go with Winter Hulk, and she has a lot in common with Bucky Barnes. So apparently Russians love to kidnap people and experiment on them in the Marvel Universe. They snatched Jennifer, performed their whole brainwashing technique on her, which included things like letting vampires feeding on her to make her weak, and turned her into Winter Hulk, a stronger, angrier, redder version of the classic hero. And she came with some fancy new power upgrades. Besides being a single-minded killing machine, Winter Hulk could breathe green fire that incinerated anything in its path. Here's hoping we get to see some of that green fire in She-Hulk. You know, as long as the CGI looks okay, I guess.
Moon Knight is the most recent new hero introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And what a way to introduce him! Say what you will about the second episode, and the third and the fourth and what have you once those come out, but the first episode was awesome. Such fantastic tone and an incredible atmosphere all around. But besides that, it's cool to see this B-tier Marvel character get some time to shine in the spotlight. And since the MCU is all about the multiverse these days, I figured we could welcome Moon Knight properly by looking at some of the most powerful variants of him and ranking them by how much butt they can kick. Cause you know, that's what we do on this channel after all. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start this list off with a variant of Moon Knight that we don't actually know that much about, because she only appeared in about 3 or so panels in one issue of the comics, but the premise of what makes her different from the other Moon Knights is interesting enough in of itself. Crescent Moon was the Moon Knight variant from Earth 920942. She was the leader of a group of religious warriors who we saw defending the Manhattan, presumably a mashup of Manhattan and the Vatican, from the forces of a villain called Greywing, a sort of Batman thing, which is actually kind of a funny little jab to all the comic book fans who constantly compare Moon Knight to Batman. There are certainly a lot of them. Some of you are probably doing it in the comments right now. This hyper-religious version of MK could have been cool to explore a bit further, but alas, she was taken out by the twisted doppelganger of Moon Knight known as Moonshade rather quickly after being introduced. So we will probably never see that version of the character fleshed out any further. You know, as I was saying, more often than not, when someone is talking about Moon Knight, eventually someone else is going to compare him to Batman, usually calling him Marvel's version of the Caped Crusader. And I totally get why people would be making that comparison. Heck, maybe I might have a video in the works where I do just that, you know, you could look forward to. And maybe you could click the subscribe button and ring the bell or whatever to be notified when it comes out. You know, if you want to like help me out or whatever, but if not, it's cool too, I guess. In that same issue of the comic that gave us Crescent Moon, we got a look at a version of Moon Knight that definitely plays into the Batman comparison. This is Moon Man, a character very reminiscent of the Golden Age version of Batman. His attire is much less intimidating looking, a lot more classic superhero-esque, and he even has a plucky sidekick, Moon Boy, who is very clearly meant to be an analog to Robin. Moon Man and Moon Boy wound up playing a pretty decisive role in Moon Knight's battle against the Twisted Doppelganger, ultimately teaming up with the main continuity MK to take it down, though Moon Man here was nearly ended himself in the process. As if it wasn't for Mark Spector coming in with a conductive charge and his bow staff to take him out and save him, Moon Man would have been toast. Now, Moon Man definitely gets some major bonus points for playing a part in taking out this major foe, someone who is super powerful. And also he gets a few points for having a sidekick who probably helps him out more often than not. I say probably because we don't actually know for sure, as this was the one and only appearance of Moon Man, so we didn't actually get to see any more of Moon Man and Moon Boy. But you know, Robin helped out Batman quite a bit throughout the years, so it's probably safe to assume the same is true here. If a named character exists within Marvel Comics, odds are there's a version of them from the year 2099 as well. And, expectedly, this holds true for Moon Knight, as we got a chance to see a version of the character from that year who takes the whole connection to the moon thing to a whole other level. This Moon Knight actually resides within the city of Adelon, which is on the moon itself. Serving as a defender of the moon's population, Moon Knight 2099 wound up encountering Uatu the Watcher, who at the time was considering destroying some artificial versions of the Fantastic Four that he had previously created. MK 2099, though, convinced Uatu to instead allow them to live, to allow them to try to live up to the legacy of those they were modeled after. Power level wise, this MK is presumably about on par with regular Moon Knight, having been chosen as a champion of Khonshu. However, they do have a slight edge over the main continuity MK, as they have the benefit of future technological advancements boosting their arsenal of gadgets and weapons. Seriously though, when are Disney and Marvel just gonna pull the trigger and give us a 2099 MCU already? I just really like the 2099 characters and I would love to see them on the big screen. If it helps at all, I already have a script treatment ready to go, so you know, we can make this happen like right now. Disney, Marvel, call me. The Amalgam Comics universe is one of my favorite things to bring up when people talk about the absolute absurdity that was comics in the 90s. This is something that we will probably never see again, as it took characters from Marvel Comics and characters from DC Comics and slammed them together as part of a massive joint venture between the two rival publishers. This resulted in us getting Moonwing, an amalgamation of Moon Knight and Nightwing. This version of Moon Knight is perhaps the most skilled in terms of martial arts among all of them, inheriting both Mark Spector's and Dick Grayson's fighting styles. He also has the added bonus of enhanced strength, durability, and reflexes depending on the phases of the moon. The fuller it is, the stronger he gets. That's some pretty basic Moon Knight stuff there, but still, he gets it. He is exactly what you'd expect when you mash these two characters together. Basically, a more badass version of both wrapped up into one. That's pretty cool, huh? Would be really awesome to see more of the character, but as I said, it's probably never going to happen, especially given the current state of both of the publishers. Definitely a bummer. Moonwing showed us what happened when you combine Moon Knight with a character from DC. But what happens when you combine MK with another Marvel character? After gaining control of the Infinity Stones herself, Gamora used them to send the souls of everyone in the universe into Soul World, combining many of them together in order to incapacitate them and presumably to save space in there. Though if the Soul World in the comics is anything like the one we saw within the MCU, it does look kind of roomy in there, so I guess she didn't really have to do that part after all. This resulted in new characters who were fundamentally just combinations of two classic characters. Included amongst them was Arachnite, a combination of Moon Knight and Spider-Man. After being nearly killed by an attack from Goblin by Night, Peter Parker of Warp World was bitten by a mystical spider that linked him to the totem energy of ancient spiders. This, in turn, saved his life, but also fractured his mind, causing him to develop 4 separate personalities. Working with these 4 personas, Peter Parker became the masked vigilante Arachnite, a hero with all the same powers of regular Spider-Man, with the tech and fighting prowess of Moon Knight. After the Infinity Wars comic arc came to a close, Warp World continued existing in a diminished form within the Soul Stone, with Arachnite joining up with a small team of other heroes, becoming the Defenders. This team was made up of Arachnite, of course, Soldier Supreme, Iron Hammer, and Weapon Hex. I know that in the world of media, money talks, so I will just say that I will pay Disney and Marvel this slightly worn $5 bill to bring this team to the MCU. I just think seeing Weapon Hex on the big screen would be a lot of fun. Tell me that I'm wrong. Also, it'll probably cost more than $5, but that's the best I can do. What happens when you take a character who is empowered by an ancient moon god and put him in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? You get a zombified Moon Knight. it's fairly straightforward. You don't really have to ask that question. Mark Spector from Earth 2149, also known as the Marvel Zombies universe, fared about as well against the rampaging undead as pretty much any other hero, managing to hold out for at least a little while, though he presumably was zombified when Nick Fury sent a team of heroes down to try to battle back the zombie horde. Zombie Moon Knight, despite being technically dead, still managed to possess the same powers he did while he was alive, including increased strength, durability, and agility at night, though he was a considerably less capable fighter in his zombified state. But I mean, the dude's literally rotting, so I can't really blame him on that one. Since I already talked about a version of MK from the year 2099, I figured why not look a little bit further forward in time, if there even is one from past that point. To my surprise, there is. This is Moon Knight from the year 3167, which is a super random year, but alright, let's just run with it. This particular Moon Knight holds a distinction that no other MK that we've seen so far can really claim. She is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse, meaning that she means some serious business. In this version of reality, Apocalypse successfully rose in the 21st century, and went about judging which sentient species deserved to live, and which deserved to perish. After Earth was nearly destroyed, Apocalypse pulled the remains of the world together, and separated it out into different realms, each belonging to the remaining people who he had deemed worthy of surviving. When a time-traveling group of X-Men came forward, finding themselves in this reality, Apocalypse sent out his horsemen, Moon Knight included, to try to destroy them. Which went well for a while, as they put up a hell of a fight. But things ultimately ended badly for this Moon Knight, as Nightcrawler teleported her into a pit of spikes, presumably ending her life. Though Khonshu has been shown to be capable of resurrecting his champions, so who knows, she could have came back. If it wasn't for the fact that the X-Men later took Apocalypse down and the world fell apart because his power was kind of the only thing holding it together, yeah, it's sorta hard to come back from that. Still though, a version of Moon Knight that is granted additional strength by Apocalypse and made one of his horsemen is certainly deserving of a spot pretty high up on this list, as that's gotta be a pretty powerful Moon Knight. But she's not the most powerful. During the Infinity War story arc, Magus, a future evil version of Adam Warlock, created a bunch of souped up, twisted doppelgangers of several noteworthy heroes. One of which was, of course, Moon Knight, spawning the abomination Moonshade. Come on, you knew he was going to be on this list somewhere. I've already talked about him twice. Dude was kind of a big deal. This being possessed the ability to absorb the life essence of other beings, effectively becoming stronger with each one. And that is exactly what it said about doing, traveling throughout the multiverse to different versions of Earth, tracking down each variant of Moon Knight and taking them out, becoming exponentially more of a threat. This gave us a comic story just absolutely packed with different versions of MK. In fact, it was incredibly difficult for me to not just pack this list with different ones from that one issue. It certainly would have made editing this video a lot easier, but where's the fun in that? Also, some of you are probably wondering, yes, that is a dinosaur Moon Knight, and no, I didn't include him on the list because that's pretty much the only look at him that we ever got. If I knew literally anything else about him, he'd be on this list. Trust me, it's a T-Rex blessed by Khonshu. That's just amazing. Luckily though, the main continuity Moon Knight followed him across the different realities, and ultimately put a stop to him, despite being at a serious power disadvantage. Since at that point, Moonshade had seemingly absorbed countless numbers of Moon Knights. I don't really need to get into how the fight actually went down, as I sort of already talked about that when I was talking about Moon Man, but you know, it was a thing that happened. A doin's a transpired. That being said, just because he got beat by regular old MK doesn't diminish the threat he posed as a character. If he were to pop back up and was allowed to just run rampant for a little while right now, he could very well become a major threat to not just Moon Knight, but the entirety of the multiverse. Plus, I mean, come on. The dude's worth putting this high up on the list just for his appearance alone. I mean, just look at him. Ugh.
Your haircut? Noticed you've copied my beard. I've heard of being your own worst enemy, but this is getting a little ridiculous. With an ever-expanding multiverse, the characters we know and love have likely received every possible upgrade, alteration, and makeover imaginable. Sometimes these changes make them weaker, given universes where those characters no longer even exist have been created as well. Sometimes they receive an upgrade in power, and sometimes they become the most powerful being in the universe. Let's take a look at the Marvel variants stronger than the original right now.
Fine, willing to accept that. Why are there so many of you?
Because Loki survived. That's just what we do.
Great, so how do we escape?
We don't.
Thor has many variants, but one of his most well-known and definitely most powerful is Old King Thor. This version did become King of Asgard and obtained the Thor Force, formerly known as the Odin Force. He is a battle-hardened warrior with cosmic abilities and the wisdom of a great ruler. Not only is the strength of this Thor unmatched, but he also once found his way into obtaining the Phoenix Force as well. He's defeated enemies that make the regular Thor run scared, and has struck fear into the hearts of his enemies for centuries. Plus, this one decided to keep the eye patch. In an alternate universe, the world was ravaged by a nuclear apocalypse, leaving it covered with little life and tons of gamma radiation. In this reality, certain characters benefited in power from this occurrence. One of them was the Hulk. Not only did his strength seem to increase tenfold, but he also developed a pretty sick buff old man look. Adopting the new name, the Maestro, this version of the Hulk is one of the most powerful ever seen, and also one of the most evil. Without a sense of morality restricting all of this new power, the Maestro could easily beat the original Hulk into submission. As if a nuclear apocalypse wasn't bad enough, right? Have you ever wondered what would happen if the world folded in half, therefore combining several characters' backstories and power sets? No, just me. In this very scenario, Captain America's variant became one of the strongest and wisest to exist, when he became the Soldier Supreme. Crossing histories with Doctor Strange, Steve Rogers became the most powerful magic wielder in the universe, who could still absolutely use his fists if he wanted to. The Soldier Supreme has incredible magical ability, and the best part is, he can conjure a new shield every time someone catches it or breaks it. The Soldier Supreme is definitely working smarter, not harder, when it comes to tactical strategies and overall butt kicking. In an alternate universe, Tony Stark watched as his world was ravaged by a super Skrull named Titanus. Several of his friends and family were killed before his very eyes, and Tony lost his mind. He then began raiding the weapons and technology storage facilities of the world's smartest beings who had lost their lives to Titanus, updating his armor with each stop. Without a care left in the world, Tony lost his mind and developed a much darker and brutal form of justice. He was sent across dimensions by Reed Richards and gave his original version a whole heap of trouble, proving that an unhinged Tony Stark is one with sensational power. For a brief time in the main Marvel Earth 616, Carol Danvers gained a new power called the Binary. This Binary increased Carol's abilities and even allowed her the ability of space travel, which she did not have previously. The Binary actually was a form of mutation, making Carol Danvers a full-fledged mutant, even getting offers to join the X-Men. This Binary energy then took its own form once it left Carol's body. Combined with the Phoenix Force and the original Captain Marvel's corpse, this new Binary hero takes the physical form of Carol without actually having a physical body, and can overpower Carol at every turn. There is a variant of Peter Parker who decided to keep a power known as the Enigma Force. This is a cosmic power that severely enhances the capability of the user. With this power, Peter Parker became Captain Universe. On top of the normal powers of Spider-Man from Earth 616, this version from Earth 13, with the help of the Enigma Force, has the power to fly, manipulate matter and energy in the form of concussive blasts, and a spider sense enhanced to a cosmic level, meaning he can sense irregularities at the subatomic level across the universe. This version of Peter is easily one of, if not the most powerful ever seen. The Scarlet Warlock is the male version of Wanda Maximoff from another universe. Truthfully, he's no more powerful than the Wanda we know and love. That is until something crazy happened. The Scarlet Warlock accidentally combined himself with Wolverine, Quicksilver, Magneto, and Mesmero of his universe, and this amalgam creature became known as Brother Mutant. This abomination of a creature was almost unstoppable, as he possessed all the powers of the beings he was made of. So essentially, Brother Mutant is a version of Wanda who possesses not only her power, but the powers of several other mutants as well, including super speed, magnetism, hyperhypnosis, increased healing, and an adamantium skeleton. Geez, just don't take the kids away from this one. In the What If animated TV show, we saw one of the most powerful versions of Doctor Strange we will likely ever see. When Christine Palmer's death proved to be an absolute point in time in that universe, Stephen Strange drove himself mad trying to find a way to prevent it. He spent years absorbing the energy from extra-dimensional beings, building up his power but losing himself in the process. We know this version is much stronger than the original, considering he beat the good version of himself split by the Ancient One. While he now exists in a destroyed universe, he still has absorbed so much power that the Watcher even goes to him when he needs help. Thanos has always been a conqueror, and power-hungry to say the least. In a one-off story entitled The Infinity Ending, a variant of Thanos grew to be the most powerful of any in existence. He amassed so much power that he began challenging universal constants like infinity and eternity. Once he took their power, he was capable of bringing down beings like Galactus and the Living Tribunal. Eventually, he went for the whole kit and caboodle, and challenged the One Above All. The One Above All is essentially Marvel's version of God. He is all-knowing and all-powerful and has no equal. When Thanos took his place, he appeared as the new One Above All in the sky with untold and unmatched power. He had the capability of destroying literally everything in the universe, which he did until he was convinced to bring it all back. In the Loki TV series, we met several other versions of Loki, but one really stuck out as being more powerful than the rest. No, we're not talking about Kid Loki or even Alligator Loki, but the version of classic Loki played by Richard E. Grant proved to be one of unmatched power. It was his power that made our regular Loki variant believe in himself. He saw the amount of magic that classic Loki possessed when he recreated Asgard from the ground up as an illusion to distract Goliath. Classic Loki also spoke about he was able to escape Thanos and exist in space, meaning up until he sacrificed himself, he was the best at mastering the uncanny Loki power of survival. During the Secret Wars event, a variant of Doctor Doom basically turned himself into a god. He used the power of the Beyonders to create Battleworld, a realm for the remaining characters to live once the Beyonders destroyed the multiverse. He then used the god particles of the Beyonders to make himself the godlike ruler of the world he created. He wiped the minds of some characters and had them serve him, and he took on the full force of the Infinity Stones. This version of Doom possessed the strongest power in the universe, and therefore far outmatches the original Victor Von Doom. The main villain of the What If TV series is probably the most powerful one we've seen in any MCU property. This also makes him the most powerful variant of that character, and he was seen when we saw what happened if Ultron won. Ultron successfully created the Vision's body and uploaded his consciousness into it. With the Mind Stone, he defeated the Avengers and his entire world. He then successfully gained the Infinity Stones from Thanos and defeated the entire universe. His sentience grew so advanced that he even sensed the presence of the Watcher and nearly conquered the entire multiverse. Considering the original Ultron we are used to was basically a whiny kid mad at his father Tony Stark, this one doesn't even compare. When the Winter Guard captured Jennifer Walters and experimented on her, she became the Winter Hulk. This alternate red version of She-Hulk has incredible strength and the mindless efficiency of a living weapon. She-Hulk is already incredibly powerful, but this upgrade essentially takes her from Bucky to Winter Soldier. Not only does she become a living weapon thanks to Russian experimentation, but she also gains an incredible new ability. She now has the power to breathe green gamma radiation flames. That's right, the Winter Hulk is a giant red fire-breathing version of She-Hulk. I love me some Jennifer Walters, but the original stands no chance against this variant. The Ultimate Universe produces a lot of lackluster variants of well-known Marvel characters, but in some cases they get a serious upgrade. One of those variants who outmatches the original in almost every instance is Reed Richards. This version of Reed uses his power to literally expand his mind. Therefore, his capacity for intelligence was increased, but he used it for less than heroic purposes. A darker version of Reed with a much larger head known as the Maker was born. The Maker even fought the original Reed in the Secret Wars story, and the only way for him to lose was through cheap tricks and distractions. Overall, he's one of the strongest Mr. Fantastics to exist. Storm is already one powerful mutant. With the power to control the weather, she has an untold amount of power at her disposal. However, in one story, she gained even more. She was turned into a vampire by none other than Dracula himself. Not only that, but she was able to resist Dracula and rejoin the X-Men, but now as a full-fledged vampire. The virus made her much more angry and vengeful, introducing us to a darker and more powerful Storm. Not only was the weather at her disposal, but the full physical advantages that come with being a vampire, including an insatiable bloodlust. At least she never has to worry about the sun, since she can make it cloudy whenever she wants. Jean Grey is most known as the mutant who houses the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is a cosmic entity that gives the host incomparable power, but has been known as a neutral force that often becomes corrupted. Jean Grey has most exemplified this when she becomes the Dark Phoenix. However, in one alternate universe, Jean Grey proves herself to be more powerful than the original when she successfully masters the Phoenix Force. With the full power of this entity under her control, she becomes the White Phoenix, and is capable of near unstoppable power, without falling into the violent murderous tendencies that her original counterpart sometimes does. The Age of Apocalypse brought us several different variants of characters we know and love. One prime example of this is Wolverine, only in this universe he is known as Weapon Omega. In this world, Apocalypse brought humanity to its knees, and served as a ruler over humans and mutants. Upon his death, Weapon Omega actually took his place. His power is similar to the normal Wolverine, only after sacrificing himself and subsequently being resurrected, his mind was twisted and warped. He has a weakness for Jean Grey, but other than that, he has the cruel leadership mindset that allows him to serve as a dictator of the Earth, something the 616 Wolverine would never do. If Deadpool wasn't wild enough, there are variants of his that far outmatch him. By far the most powerful is the version known as Deadpool. Not only did this one start a multiversal Deadpool war, but this version also killed the entire Marvel Universe. In Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Deadpool becomes cosmically aware that he is a character in a comic book, and uses this knowledge to defeat everyone. He uses a voodoo doll to kill Frank Castle, and tells Wolverine he's only been around so long because he's popular. He puts the ultimate cherry on top when he travels to the real world and kills the very people writing his comic book. The Cosmic Ghost Rider has quite the story, and he's not actually a variant of the usual Ghost Rider, but instead of Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. When Frank Castle was killed, he made a deal with Mephisto, promising to become his Ghost Rider should he be allowed to live and seek revenge. The spirit of vengeance was then imbued in him, making him the official Ghost Rider. If that wasn't enough, in his search for Thanos, he came across an injured Galactus, and agreed to help him if in return he could become a herald of his. So now, with the violent tendencies of Frank Castle, the spirit of vengeance, and the power cosmic, the Cosmic Ghost Rider is one of the most powerful characters in the universe. On Earth 19141, the most powerful version of an already powerful character exists. Adam Warlock is already capable of tangling with the likes of Thanos, but in this world he goes so much further beyond that. In this reality, Adam Warlock becomes the celestial being known as the Living Tribunal. After a cosmic journey, Adam wound up absorbing all the energy of the Living Tribunal, effectively taking his place. With this power, he has a universal and even multiversal cosmic awareness. His worldview essentially becomes reality, to the point where other entities like Eternity cannot even contain him. This variant is by far the most powerful version ever seen. Ngozi is probably one of the coolest and most powerful versions of the Black Panther out there. She was a track star who was involved in an accident that caused her to be paralyzed. Eventually, she came into contact with none other than the Venom symbiote. The two bonded quickly, and while Venom can sometimes have very toxic relationships with his hosts, this one was one of his best. Ngozi and Venom began fighting crime until she was noticed by the Dora Milaje. She was recruited, and in this universe, Ngozi became T'Challa's successor, and eventually the Black Panther. With the combined power given to the Protector of Wakanda plus the Venom symbiote, Ngozi is a legend who could take the original any day. What could possibly make a man who can alter his size at will even more powerful? Well, make him a werewolf, of course. That's right, in an alternate universe, several heroes, including Hank Pym, were transformed into mythical creatures, meaning that a look out your window could see a giant wolf waltzing down the street. This version of Hank Pym was so powerful that in the apocalyptic world he lived in, he actually ate Galactus. With size-altering capabilities plus the already incredible power invented by Hank Pym, I can't think of a scarier and more powerful version of this longtime Avenger. In an alternate universe, Janet Van Dyne left the Avengers along with Hank Pym. She even gave up superheroics altogether, and went back to totally normal life. Eventually, the Avengers were challenged by the Hulk and Namor the Submariner, and Tony Stark reached out to Hank and Hope for help. After agreeing, Hope was presented with a new suit. From this point on, she became the Iron Wasp, as her new suit was designed by Stark with the same powers as her normal Wasp suit. This version of Janet packs quite the extra punch when compared to the usual 616 version. Surprisingly, there aren't very many cool variants of Hawkeye. The original Hawkeye has had quite a journey, however, with several different arcs including his take on Ronin. Hawkeye is, however, another beneficiary of the Ultimate Universe. He is very similar to our normal Clint Barton, but he was actually a test subject for the Ultimate Universe version of the Super Soldier Serum. He is no Steve Rogers, but his strength, speed, and most importantly his eyesight is far superior to the original. He was an Olympic archer, a former death row inmate, and an intelligence operative, meaning barely, but he does outmatch the 616 Hawkeye at every turn. I'm not sure how she's gotten away with it for so long, but it's about time Black Widow officially joined the spider-themed Heroes Club. The original Natasha is great, but a significant upgrade that a variant of hers got was being bitten by a radioactive spider, turning her into the Black Spider. She gave up her normal life as a Russian spy and used her newfound powers to become an adventurer. These newfound powers, of course, included all those of Spider-Man, who was bitten by the same spider in another universe. The wall-crawling, web-swinging abilities of this version of Natasha, who still has the skills of a master spy and assassin, could outmatch the original every time.
In the dead of night, at the scene of the crime, and the speed of light, he'll arrive just in time. But which Spider-Man you get depends on what reality you reside in. Stan Lee has created a lot of iconic characters, but none of them have captured the imagination quite as much as the one he created with Steve Ditko. The teenager from Queens who got a bite from a spider gained superpowers, but still had to live a very unsuperpowered life. Stan Lee maintained that the popularity of the character was that under the mask, any one of us can be Spider-Man. While Peter Parker is the Spider-Man we all know, there have been a few others behind the mask, and here are some of the Peters and non-Peters who have worn the mask. Perhaps the most well-known alternate Spider-Man is Miles Morales, whose story was featured in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales comes from the Ultimate Universe, also known as Earth 1610. How Earth 1610 came into being in our universe is complicated. In our universe, the Ultimates was a line of comics meant to refresh the Marvel characters who have been running since the 60s. Some characters got whole new looks, like Nick Fury. And some characters' world expanded a bit. Running from 2000 to 2015, when Secret Wars collapsed parts of the multiverse, the Ultimates line influenced a lot of the look of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In that universe, a second spider slipped the lab, this time biting the nephew of the Prowler, giving him all the regular spider powers as well as the ability to camouflage and shoot stun blasts. The animated feature film featuring Miles Morales also had one of the best scenes in a superhero movie. That leap of faith sequence is just so good. Another runaway success from the Spider-Verse comes a little closer to home for Peter Parker. The love of Peter's life we all know is Mary Jane Watson, but she wasn't Peter's first love. Before there was MJ, there was Gwen Stacy. That relationship ended when Green Goblin dropped both Stacy and a trolley full of people at the same time. Peter's attempt to save both ended up fatally injuring Gwen, and she became another tragic thing Peter got to carry around with him. Over in Earth 65, Gwen was fronting her own garage band and hanging out with her bestie Peter when she got the spider bite that changed her world. When Peter tried to get into the superpowers game, he turned himself into the lizard. Gwen would end up accidentally killing Peter in his lizard form, only for him to revert so that it appeared Gwen had killed Peter Parker for no reason. If you're gonna wear the spider suit, you gotta take on some of the sad. In the 1930s, a lot of movies were made that revolved around gangsters, private eyes, and people up to no good. These films were lit in the style of earlier German cinema, with harsh contrasts and often featured simile-riddled narration and dialogue. In the 1950s, a bunch of French film critics watched all of those movies and, identifying their stylistic cues, dubbed them film noir. It is in this world that Earth 90214 got its Spider-Man. This time, in fitting with the style of pulp fiction of the time, the spider bite comes from a spider totem that grants Parker his powers via a spider god. Union busting and crime bosses play a much bigger role in the Spider-Man noir world, with his look coming from his father's World War I airman uniform. Another entry from the Edge of the Spider-Verse stories that answers the question, what if power suits? Penny Parker from Earth 14512 has a lot of the familiar beats, an Uncle Ben and Aunt May, as well as a bitey radioactive spider. This time, however, the spider is her co-pilot in her family's spider suit, a powered suit of armor with some of the usual Spider-Man powers on top of being a big giant robot suit. Before the Spider-Verse was a thing, there was still an alternate Spider-Man from the weird end of the multiverse. Of course, we're talking about Peter Porker, the Spider-Ham. Created in 1983 as a bit of self-parody, Spider-Ham proved popular enough to eventually star in his own semi-regular comics under Marvel's children-oriented Star line of comics. Peter Porker inverts the formula a bit, where Peter begins his story as a spider that belongs to May Porker, a pig trying to bring fusion power to the beauty industry. The end result is when she tries her nuclear-powered hairdryer, she ends up irradiating herself and then biting Peter and turning him from spider to pig. If Spider-Man Noir answered the question of what if Spider-Man happened in the past, then Spider-Man 2099 answered the question of what if Spider-Man, but in the future. Part of a line of 2099 titles that postulated a Marvel Universe 100 years on, this Spider-Man is Miguel O'Hara. Miguel was slipped a poison that was meant to make him reliant on an antidote as a blackmail scheme, but ended up taking a formula meant to replicate Spider-Man's powers. Which it did. In a little bit of Back to the Future magic, Miguel ended up being his own inspiration to take up the Spider mantle. Miguel's potential future came into question during the Secret Wars event that resulted in Miguel landing in our time and slow-boating back to 2099 to tell his younger self to become Spider-Man to protect the future. Past. Both, kinda. I don't know. Miguel isn't the only time-hopping member of the family with a fondness for the spider look. Miguel managed to pass down a passion for living in whatever moment his son felt like living by becoming a time traveler. A lot of that comes down to traveling to our time and teaming up with various members of his family also displaced by time. Gabriel has no spider powers of his own, leaving most of that to his dad's spider suit. He also created the not at all nightmare-inducing arachnauts, a swarm of tiny robot spiders Gabriel can control. Freaky. There was a lot of fallout when Spider-Man failed to save Gwen Stacy, and that includes rival the Jackal blaming Spider-Man for her death. The Jackal dealt with his feelings in a completely normal and rational way. He cloned Peter Parker, as you do. After that goes predictably bad, there's a bit of switcheroo with some bodies that makes Peter think that his clone is dead, while his clone takes the name of Peter's uncle and the maiden name of his aunt, Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly tries the whole bumming around thing, but that sense of responsibility is hard to avoid even if you're a copy of Peter Parker. And when he came back to New York to check on Aunt May, he started life as the Scarlet Spider, working with the original. Or is he? There was a bit of confusion of which was the original Peter Parker. Clone or original, when Peter hung up his web shooters during Mary Jane's pregnancy, Ben Reilly took the mantle for a while. If Spider-Ham, time travel, and clones aren't weird enough for you, then there's the strange case of the Tsum Tsum. They're small, they're kinda cute, they multiply when they sneeze for some reason, and they're able to imitate the powers of whoever they want. One of the Tsum Tsum saw Spider-Man on TV, and did what we all did when we first saw Spider-Man. Got some Spider-Man thermals and ran around the house pretending to be Spider-Man. The Tsum Tsum started imitating Spider-Man powers and all. Well, until someone tried to get him to imitate Ultron. But once you've gone Spider-Man, that sense of responsibility is hard to shake. And he went back to being a tiny, adorable Spider-Man. One of the first things that anyone thinks about when they think of spiders, aside from, "Oh, get it off," is the number of legs. But when you add up the limbs on old Parker, you get the standard 4, not 8. Without the 8 legs, are you really a Spider-Man or just Sticky Guy? Perhaps the weirdest attempt to put the spider in Spider-Man was a villain from the cartoons, Zoltan Amadeus. Zoltan created a serum to recreate Spider-Man's powers, which worked for a moment, and he was able to go on a crime spree as a fake Spider-Man. Then the serum decided to get literal with the whole spider thing, giving him a lower body that's all spider. Ooh, get it off, it's in my hair! While Marvel didn't find its feet until the Silver Age, it went from Atlas to Marvel, and Stan Lee started steering the company. It still had a long history of Atlas and timely comics. In 1947, that comic line created its own Spider-Man. And if Zoltan Amadeus wasn't nightmare fuel enough, then this Spider-Man as villain might fit the bill. Like Gabriel O'Hara, this vintage villain had a small army of spiders that he was experimenting with. Oh, and he's feeding them human blood. He would capture his victims with elaborate artificial webs that eventually would lead to his downfall. Of all the people who have mantled up as Spider-Man or Spider-Man adjacent, the ones we can identify with the most are the superfans. Martha Franklin didn't have that much of a connection to Peter Parker and no sketchy run-ins with spiders, radioactive or otherwise. Her powers came from the weird stuff her parents were into when she took her dad's place at the Gathering of Five, where old relics dole out monkey paw-esque gifts with all kind of weird catches. Franklin wound up with superpowers, but instead of starting her own franchise, she filled in for Peter Parker when he went missing for a bit, then took over Spider-Woman for Jessica Drew. If there's one thing that WandaVision has taught us, it's that superheroes having kids can be a super hard thing. Ben Parker was the second child for the power couple, with their teenage daughter already manifesting powers and saving the universe. After a run-in with Carnage where the symbiote bonded with the baby, little Ben's powers kicked into overdrive, which would see him crawling on ceilings before he could walk. The parents of this reality, Earth 962, died protecting him, and he was whisked away by Spider-Girl. It turns out that the reason there was all these different Spider-Men and Spider-Women is because realities all have a spider totem, and little Benji, well, he was the strongest one of all. Spider-Man seems like he's always been, and a part of that is how quickly the character caught the imagination of the world. Introduced in 1962, by 1967 Stan Lee was consulting on a half-hour Spider-Man cartoon following the 7-minute Marvel Superheroes cartoon. The animation was simple, and after Stan Lee stepped aside and Ralph Bakshi started producing it, it contained less and less iconic Spider-Man villains, and more generic villains, suspiciously similar to Bakshi's previously Rocket Robin Hood. None of that matters as much as the theme song though. which is one of the most recognizable superhero themes ever written. Does whatever a spider can. Come on, everybody, you know it! Crude and recycled animation aside, the 1967 Spider-Man was iconic. But in the 90s, a different kind of shared universe was emerging. Marvel's mutants had made it to the TV, with their own rockin' and immediately recognizable theme. When the X-Men universe crossed over to Spider-Man, the animated series, it became a shared universe. It's also perhaps the most faithful of the adaptations. All the beats are there. Gets bitten by a special spider, in this case one being experimented on for healing properties. Misuses his powers at first, then the advice and tragedy from Uncle Ben. There's even an Insidious 6. Sinister apparently didn't work for the cartoon. And, of course, the Venom symbiote. There are some Spider-Mans, men, whatever, that just defy explanation, and one of those is the Spider-Man from across the ocean in Japan. It's so bizarre, in fact, that Disney led with the story in their 616 series that explores the history of Marvel. The story goes that an eager comics fan on vacation to Japan found two things. The Japanese loved comics, and there were no Western comics. So he brokered a deal where Marvel and Toei would share characters. In that process, Japan got to produce their own show, but were allowed to change it to fit the Japanese market. Naturally, this meant giant robots and a slick car called the GP7. The show had one important fan, Stan Lee. Rather than being precious with his creation, Stan the Man was elated with how much like a comic book the show looked, even if most of Spider-Man's story was tossed out of the window. If Stan Lee was elated with the Japanese series, it was in part because he wasn't thrilled with the 1977 television outing for Spider-Man. While it's a bit of a golden age of comic book adaptations now, with one network airing no less than 5 superhero shows at one time at one point, this isn't the first time that the airways was crowded with capes. In the 70s, Marvel and DC squared off with 2 popular adaptations as TV shows, The Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman. Hoping to swing in on that action was Spider-Man. Unfortunately, this one didn't quite catch on. Even worse complications with the rights to Spider-Man adaptations held up the making of a proper Spider-Man movie for decades. When those rights were finally sorted out and Spider-Man made it to the screen, it was an adaptation that, along with the X-Men over at Fox, it was credited with saving the superhero movie from an early death. That early death came in the form of Batman and Robin. Bat nipples. Enough said. The movie was helmed by longtime comic fan and stylistic filmmaker Sam Raimi. More known for his horror movies, but also created Darkman when he was denied the chance to do a movie about the pulp hero The Shadow. Raimi's adaptation featured the ever boyish-looking Tobey Maguire and a picture-perfect cast. One big change, however, was Parker's organic web shooters. Traditionally, the web shooters were the invention of the young genius Peter Parker, but in this case, it came out of him. Kinda gross. Spider-Man 2 has gone on to be one of the best-regarded superhero movies ever. Unfortunately, Spider-Man 3 does not have that level of affection, and the Raimi-Maguire series ended there. Rather than move forward with Raimi's 4th Spider-Man entry, Sony decided to reboot the character in the hopes of getting some distance between jazz-dancing Peter Parker and a lackluster Venom. The result was The Amazing Spider-Man. This one swapped Mary Jane for Gwen Stacy, gave Peter his mechanical web shooters back, and leaned in more on later stories, where it's revealed that Peter's parents were involved in the super science game themselves. A second movie, meant to set up the Sinister Six and a wider Spider-Verse, didn't get the reception that Sony was hoping for, and those plans quietly went away. There has been a list of luminaries that have taken the mantle of Spider-Man temporarily for different reasons. Some were covering, some were villains trying to smear Spider-Man's name or prove they could do it better. Here's a roll call of some of them who are traded their masks for Spideys. Craven, Otto Octavius, Matt Murdock, Danny Rand, Mary Jane, Wade Wilson, Bruce Banner, in a weird way, Norman Osborn, Loki, Kamala Khan, Quentin Beck, Mac Gargan, Logan, Flash Thompson, William Braddock, kinda, Harry Osborn, and of course, Stan Lee himself. Sony's loss with The Amazing Spider-Man turned out to be a big win for fans everywhere, and a win-win situation between Disney and Sony. While Marvel was absorbing Fox like a gelatinous cube to get the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four back, they tried a more diplomatic channel with Sony and instead offered shared custody. Sony would produce a new pair of Spider-Man movies with Disney, and then that Spider-Man could show up in Marvel movies like Civil War and the last 2 Avengers movie. This deal was too good to be true when it almost came to an early end with Spider-Man Far From Home ending on a cliffhanger. A little drunk dialing from Tom Holland got things back on track, and now good old Tommy returns as Spider-Man in a 3rd MCU movie next year. After 2 reboots and one of the most recognizable origin stories in comics, the MCU have done away with the origin story, and instead have gone with the youngest portrayal of Peter so far. and let's not kid ourselves, the best one. We love you, Tom!
Variants everywhere. The best is yet to come now that the MCU has cracked wide open. We've already seen a number of alternate versions of characters like Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Peggy Carter, and so many more, which can only mean there's more to come. All characters are open, and if we use the comics as a guide, they could be real trouble for the heroes we've come to know and love. Some of the most powerful versions of the main MCU crew have not been seen yet, and when they arrive, they're going to need more than a zombie body and can-do attitude. Let's take a look at the strongest Marvel variants we haven't seen in the MCU yet, right now. One of the most famous and most powerful variants of any character belongs to the wall crawler Spider-Man.
You're a deeply mistrusting person, and I respect it.
Now, this isn't a variant of Peter Parker, but instead the main Spider-Man of another universe, and his name is Miles Morales. Miles is a young kid who idolized Peter Parker until his untimely demise. After being bitten by a radioactive spider, Miles gained superpowers similar to the original Spider-Man, only with a few bonuses. Miles actually became stronger than Peter, and his extra powers like invisibility and electricity shocks made him quite the hero. In the MCU, Peter has already met 2 other versions of himself, so now it's time for him to meet many more from the Spider-Verse.
You want me to crack it?
Yeah.
This will be happening in animated form, and if I get my wish, those animated characters will be coming to the live-action MCU. In the comics, Miles even gets transported to the main 616 universe and joins forces with his hero, Peter of that universe. Sounds like a pretty great direction for the MCU going forward. It turns out that while some variants are infinitely heroic, some of the most powerful are also the most evil. We've only just gotten a taste of Mr. Fantastic in the MCU, and let's just say he turned into a popular Italian dish rather quickly. So while we wait for him to appear in the main Earth 616 timeline of the MCU, why not introduce more variants in the meantime? One of the most evil and most powerful versions of Reed Richards is a variant known as the Maker. The Ultimate Universe is one of the more popular alternate Marvel worlds. It's likely we will see it pretty soon given that we've started exploring the multiverse in the MCU. The Maker is from the Ultimate Universe, and he could be the greatest villain in it. Reed Richards of this world literally stretched his head and his brain so that his capacity for intelligence was increased by at least double. Considering Reed was already the smartest man in the universe, this put him on another level far above anyone else. However, this power was not used for good. This Reed is manipulative and conniving, and he has been able to outwit everyone in every turn, especially for the majority of the Secret Wars storyline. Considering we may be leading to that event in the MCU, we could be seeing the Maker pretty soon. Speaking of Secret Wars, one of the causes of this event is also one of the most powerful variants we have not yet seen. We've gotten versions of Doctor Doom in film. Granted, they've all been less than satisfying. The first Doom we see in the MCU could also be the most powerful one to exist. In the Secret Wars event, King Doom, or Emperor Doom to his friends, was able to harness the power of the Beyonders, the most powerful beings in the multiverse. Using this power, he created an entirely new world, once the Beyonders destroyed the entire multiverse for fun. He named it Battleworld and wiped the minds of most of the heroes he transported there. This version of Doom is so powerful he can take a full blast from the Infinity Stones and is unchanged. He has people like the Future Foundation and She-Hulk serving as his personal assistants, and is nearly untouchable. If the MCU is truly heading towards a Secret Wars event, based on all the incursion talk that's been going around, it's possible that Emperor Doom could be the mastermind behind it all, when the heroes find themselves on an entirely new world. With the multiverse wide open and plenty more Thor to come, it's only a matter of time before some other Chris Hemsworths start making their way to the main 616 universe to say hi. There are many options, but the most powerful by far goes by the name of Old King Thor. This version of Thor completed his destiny and became the king of Asgard, and surpassed the power of even his father Odin. He was gifted the Odin Force, which he appropriately renamed the Thor Force, and used it to defend Asgard from some of the greatest enemies he would ever see. He is battle-hardened, and years of leadership have also brought him wisdom. He also one day was able to harness the full power of the Phoenix Force. This made Old King Thor one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and easily the most powerful version of the God of Thunder. There is a comic storyline involving Gore the God Butcher where Old King Thor is actually instrumental. The door is open, and we've already seen Christian Bale in that makeup. All this points to a possible Old King Thor arrival in Love and Thunder, making him the most likely variant we will see in the MCU on this list. I've been learning a lot about this next guy recently, because he's maybe the coolest amalgamation of characters that could exist. I'm talking about the Cosmic Rider. We've seen Frank Castle in his own films and Netflix series, but this version is so far beyond the one we've come to know. First, Frank was the way you remember, violent and blinded by revenge. However, this one died and struck a deal with Mephisto, promising to be his Ghost Rider so long as he could be allowed to live and seek his revenge against Thanos. So now we have the Punisher combined with Ghost Rider, and we're about to make it infinitely cooler. Frank came across Galactus in his search for Thanos, and actually saved the giant World Eater's life. In return, Frank Castle as the Ghost Rider was gifted the power Cosmic, as Galactus made him his herald. The combination of so many different characters in one variant makes him an absolute powerhouse. The Cosmic Rider to me is the perfect combination of 3 of Marvel's darkest and most brutal characters. Iron Man is already an extremely powerful character, thanks to his incredible mind that lets him build some of the universe's most powerful weapons.
Perfectly level.
It's hard to believe that the only way to make him more powerful in another universe is for him to lose his mind. Truthfully, I believe if he had survived past Endgame, there could have been a way to see this version of Tony Stark come to fruition in the MCU. I'm talking about Iron Maniac. In a dystopian future, Tony witnessed his friends and family all get killed, which drove him mad. He raided the technology storages of fallen geniuses and put together a new high-tech armor, and used it for blinded good old-fashioned revenge. He became so brutal and violent that Mr. Fantastic actually needed to send him to a whole new universe. Truthfully, if Thanos' snap had gone a little different and Tony lost Pepper and eventually his daughter, the Iron Maniac may be wreaking havoc on the MCU as we speak. Norrin Radd has long operated as the Silver Surfer in the Marvel Universe. He is already one of the most powerful characters, as he controls the power Cosmic as a herald of Galactus. He can focus pure energy thanks to the use of his board.
Why are you destroying our planet?
I have no choice.
In another universe, the one who gifted him his power, Galactus, found himself in some trouble. The younger Thanos of this universe hunted Galactus across the cosmos and killed him. Left alone with the power Cosmic, Norrin Radd was nowhere near powerful enough to challenge the now King Thanos. Norrin was renamed the Fallen One, but gained incredible power when he proved himself worthy to wield the mighty Mjolnir. His body changed to be composed entirely of black matter, and he now possessed 2 of the greatest known powers in the universe. It wasn't enough to beat Thanos, the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and their entire army, but he put up a good fight. The Fallen One could be a very interesting variant to come crashing through that multiversal portal. This is definitely a pipe dream, but it's still cool to imagine. One of the universes whose variants we will likely never see is the Amalgam Universe.
You want to tell me what you want?
Okay, never say never, because I never thought we would see Chris Evans say Avengers Assemble after hundreds of heroes walk through portals to fight Thanos. However, if one day DC and Marvel can get along for just one movie, we could see some of our favorite characters cross over. One of the most formidable characters is one who combines the very powerful magic from both the Marvel and DC universes. Doctor Strange Fate is a mashup of Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate, 2 of the strongest magic users from each world. Oh, by the way, this character is actually a version of Charles Xavier. So, a meta-mutant with mind control abilities travels to meet the Ancient One, the Lord of Order of the Amalgam Universe. He easily surpassed his master as the Lord of Order, and becomes one of the most powerful beings in any universe.
What did he say?
Look, I don't know that this will ever happen. My fingers are crossed, but if we are ever so blessed to visit the Amalgam Universe and the MCU, Doctor Strange Fate is one person we need to meet. I've been screaming for years that the MCU should send Bruce Banner on a path of revenge for whatever reason so we can get him as a pseudo-villain, such as the World War Hulk storyline. However, now they likely have to wait a couple years to pull their Illuminati card again. In the meantime, however, my dream of the Hulk becoming a villain could definitely come true in the MCU with the help of the multiverse. One of, if not the strongest variants of the Hulk comes from a dystopian future where a nuclear war decimated life on Earth. The nuclear war left the Earth covered in gamma radiation, which the Hulk of that world breathed in like oxygen. This increased his strength and power tenfold and turned him into the Maestro. A man hardened by a world at war, the Maestro became a villain, basically took over what was left of the world. He killed Hercules and ruled the remaining survivors. As the Maestro, he grew cold, bitter, and most importantly, angry. The Maestro is commonly referred to as one of the strongest variants of the Hulk, and certainly the most evil. I just love it, man. I love it when other universes combine characters.
Hey, fabulous, I love it.
2 of the craziest and fiercest Spider-Man villains once joined forces, creating possibly the scariest and most powerful version of each. When Norman Osborn needed to destroy nanites in his body, he bonded with the Carnage symbiote in order to destroy them. While bonded, Norman took the Goblin formula, creating the stuff of nightmares, the Red Goblin. The Carnage-infused Goblin attacked nearly all of Peter's closest allies, and proved to be the most powerful villain he would face. The Red Goblin was the most powerful symbiote as well, and he proved himself to be impervious to fire, and could create pumpkin bombs out of thin air using his symbiotic powers. The insanity of Norman Osborn under the Goblin formula in many ways surpasses that of Cletus Cassidy, meaning as a host he was Carnage's greatest dream come true, and everyone else's worst nightmare. Just forget about the fact that Venom ate Carnage in the Sonyverse for some reason, and maybe we can get Willem Dafoe draped in red symbiote glory. Thor was not the only one who ascended to the throne of Asgard in another life. One trickster we know and love seems to be clamoring for the throne across the entire multiverse. In the TV series Loki, we saw many versions of the God of Mischief, including Lady Loki, Classic Loki, Kid Loki, President Loki, and even Alligator Loki. For that last one, I assume it was more of a low bench type situation as opposed to a throne.
Why are there so many of you?
Because Loki survived. That's just what we do.
However, we have not actually yet seen one who has accomplished his goal. There was trailer footage that made it seem as though King Loki would appear in the series, but now that it's all said and done, he was nowhere to be found. In the universe where Loki became king, he had to defeat Thor and Odin, which he did successfully, and took all their power. He is much more stern and less whimsical, which may have been the difference, also making this Loki the most powerful one to exist. Given that Season 2 is on its way, I seriously doubt we've seen the last of the Loki variants, and King Loki is primed to make an appearance. We've already talked about an alternate Spider-Man, but there's just so many to choose from. One of the most famous is the Superior Spider-Man. This is actually a combination of Peter Parker and Otto Octavius. In this universe, Otto actually succeeded in defeating Peter, and switched bodies with him. So Peter's mind went on to perish in the body of a man-octopus, and Otto, unbeknownst to everyone, was now Spider-Man for all intents and purposes. The Superior Octopus combines incredible strength and intelligence with the mind of a maniac, and now the perfect undercover disguise. However, something happened that he did not expect. The longer he spent in Peter's body, the more heroic he became. It was as though Spider-Man's very cells were heroic, and it rubbed off on one of his greatest foes. The Superior Octopus is a fascinating character study, and could serve as a secret villain who infiltrates the next Spider-Verse team-up. Blade has officially entered the MCU, even though it was in a weird voice cameo off-screen.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
However, his arrival can only mean one thing. Vampires are on their way into the MCU. This probably suggests that there are other worlds out there that are already infested with vampires. The man at the TVA and Loki has even confirmed this. My favorite possibility that this presents is the fact that there are probably already vampire versions of our favorite characters out there. All it takes is for America Chavez to punch a star-shaped hole in the right wall.
You're not really useful unless you're fighting off 3 vampires that were huddled together.
One of the most powerful versions of Captain America was when he was turned into a member of the undead. This is Steve Rogers with the power of a super soldier and a vampire, combined with an insatiable bloodlust that wouldn't stop him from attacking anyone.
That's not going away anytime soon.
In an exile story, they came across Vampire Cap, and he successfully turned one of them into a vampire as well. If you want to start getting darker and darker in the MCU, Vampire Cap is a pretty good place to start. As if Deadpool wasn't crazy enough, there had to be literally millions of other even wackier variants. In the Deadpool wars, we saw so many other versions of the lovable and vulgar Merc with a mouth. These include but are not limited to Panda Pool, Groot Pool, Hawkeye Pool, Duck Pool, and so many more. And they only get weirder and weirder.
I don't know what that means.
Me neither.
However, there is a version of Deadpool that far surpasses any other in terms of sadistic behavior and cruelty. He goes by the name of Dreadpool. Dreadpool was responsible for starting a multiversal war that pitted versions of Deadpool against one another. He also is the Deadpool at the center of the story of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. This man literally went on an unstoppable rampage, mostly because he gained a sort of cosmic awareness that only a Deadpool variant could. He realized he and everyone around him were characters in a comic book, and there was nothing stopping him from ending them all. He then even traveled to the real world and killed the very people drawing him. It's arguably the most powerful thing any comic character has ever done. Ngozi is one of the most interesting characters, and is another one who combines the stories of many different characters in another universe. She was a high school track star who found herself paralyzed from the waist down. One day she found herself in the middle of a skirmish between T'Challa, the Black Panther, and the Rhino. In this moment, the Venom symbiote bonded with her, giving her not only her legs back, but also the incredible power that comes with being the host of a symbiote. Ngozi then watched as the Rhino killed T'Challa, and used her newfound powers to defeat him. The Dora Milaje were so impressed with Ngozi that they offered her the honor of being the new Black Panther and protector of Wakanda. So she was given the powers of the Black Panther and hosted the Venom symbiote, creating an incredibly powerful variant, merging the best of both worlds of 2 powerhouses. Ngozi is one of the best symbiote hosts, and when she gained some claws, she proved to be one of the greatest heroes of her universe. There's literally an endless amount of variants we could see come to the MCU. Heck, they have license to create new and even more powerful ones. Which powerful variant are you most looking forward to seeing join the MCU?
Who would win in a fight? Mark Ruffalo's Hulk versus Edward Norton's Hulk versus Eric Bana's Hulk? And throw in Lou Ferrigno's Hulk in there too, why not? That's a lot of Hulks. And speaking of all those Hulks, did you know that the gigantic green rage monster has had an abundance of different personalities and character traits over the years that has made him one of the most fascinating characters in Marvel Comics? But what version of the Hulk is the strongest? Well, that's what I'm here today to discuss. Join me as I break down every major version we've seen of the Hulk, the character's strengths and weaknesses, and whether or not we could see these characters in live action. Let's get started right now. Okay, I want to talk about Professor Hulk. No, not the version from the comics who is actually pretty rad, but the version of the character we saw in the MCU, because I have a serious bone to pick. Look, both Bruce Banner and Hulk were on one of the best character trajectories of anyone in the MCU. Bruce started the MCU scared and on the run because he couldn't control the other guy and did whatever he could in order to keep him locked away. Then, over a few more movies, we saw what happens when Hulk totally loses control like in Age of Ultron. And then the Hulk personality took over completely for a few years and spent his time as a gladiator on Sakaar, with Banner not realizing how much time had passed, as evidenced by him thinking Ultron was still around after Thor coaxed Banner back out. Then there was the plot point of Banner being afraid of turning into the Hulk again because it meant Banner might be gone forever. But he decided to take that risk anyway by jumping in and making a huge impact, literally, in fighting the giant wolf Fenris. Then Infinity War happened and the Hulk personality refused to come out after getting his butt kicked by Thanos. The Russo brothers have said that it wasn't because Hulk was scared, but because he didn't want to fight Banner's battles anymore, which, sure. Infinity War ended with Banner telling Hulk that the two of them had major issues to work out, but do we see it? No. Endgame had a lot going on, so they skipped past any dramatic character resolution for a sight gag that revealed that Banner and Hulk had merged together, combining the brain and the brawn. But there's a lot of problems with this. For one, where was the Hulk personality? The writers seemed to ignore that the Hulk was his own person with his own thoughts and feelings, and you think he would just be okay being basically completely erased?
No, sorry, I just get so angry all the time. Hulk always angry.
It would be one thing if it was said that Banner could still hear Hulk's voice or let Hulk take over now and then, but nope, goodbye Hulk. And you know what my big issue is? The Hulk is generally a gigantic rage monster who gets stronger and more powerful the angrier he gets. But by having Banner's mind in Hulk's body, it completely hinders his strength. Remember the scene where they go back in time and Hulk has to pretend to be his earlier self and pretends to half-heartedly smash things? Where's the anger gonna come from? Imagine a scenario where Endgame picked up with Hulk still not coming out and Banner being on his own for a while. But then when it comes time to snap the homemade Infinity Gauntlet, the Hulk persona takes over and wants to do it in order to be the hero, and because he knows the body can take it. I think that would have been better than what we got, but I digress. So, as we all probably know, the Hulk was originally supposed to be gray, but then, due to ink problems, it looked more green and Stan Lee ended up liking that more. Can you imagine a world where the Hulk was gray all the time? I think he'd lose some of his sparkle, don't you? The green totally makes him stand out. But just like a lot of things in Marvel Comics, writers ended up retconning the whole gray issue and making it canon. It was written so that, yes, the gray Hulk from the very beginning was the very first color the Hulk ever was, but then eventually the green Hulk that we all know and love eventually took over, and always comes out instead because it's stronger. Though that means there is a gray Hulk persona somewhere deep inside Banner, and let me tell you, it's one of the wildest versions. Later, comic writers would tweak the gray Hulk persona even more, making it a side effect of all the abuse that Bruce Banner suffered in his childhood, and manifesting itself as a gray version of the Hulk who would wind up being a tough guy Las Vegas enforcer. How wild is that? This version is like the guy who'd make you sleep with the fishes if you crossed him the wrong way. He calls himself Joe Fix-It, which I'm guessing he saw on the side of a local plumber's truck or something. This version is technically more intelligent than the original Hulk and is often tricky, manipulative, and doesn't really care about people, because he's morally ambiguous. That's his whole shtick. And although he has a solid intelligence level, he's not as strong as the other version of the Hulk. Sure, he still possesses that whole the madder he gets, the stronger he becomes ability, but it has happens at a much slower rate than his green counterpart. See, I wouldn't have minded if the MCU made it so that when Banner and Hulk combined and became Professor Hulk, that the Hulk personality got split from Banner, and that version could become a version of Grey Hulk. How would the MCU's Hulk process things now that he's a little smarter but also not as strong? That would have been awesome to see, right? Okay, this next entry is a fun one. Yes, seeing Bruce Banner Hulk out and smash stuff is a lot of fun, but every so often the comics get a little weird and create hybrid characters because, why not? Which brings me to a few of the funniest versions of Hulk that I can think of. Hulkpool and Spider-Hulk. Yeah, you can kind of guess who those combinations are. Let's start with Hulkpool. In the comic series titled Hulked Out Heroes, a gamma-powered Deadpool is sent back in time to eliminate the original Deadpool because of all the bad stuff that Wade had done. But while traveling through time, Hulkpool gets a little lost. He first gets sent back to the year 1717, where he becomes a pirate under a Captain Blackbeard version of the Thing, which is just awesome to think about. They then take a few more jaunts throughout time, including to the Old West and to World War II, where Hulkpool ends up saving Bucky and helping Captain America and Bucky hunt down and eliminate both Hitler and the Red Skull. After that, he accidentally stops the origins of a few Marvel heroes, including the original Hulk, and then finally meets the OG Deadpool and eliminates him, completing his mission. Like, I know What If would never adapt this storyline, but please, 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 can it adapt to this storyline? But I'm not quite done with the hybrid characters, because there's also Spider-Hulk. This one isn't a Bruce Banner version of the Hulk, but hey, Deadpool got really mad at me when I didn't include his best friend Spidey in the same entry as him, and I don't want Deadpool mad at me, okay? Spider-Hulk is a version of Spider-Man that was zapped with energy from the Hulk, and when Spider-Man next got angry, he turned into Spider-Hulk. And I just want to say, I think Hulk and Spidey make a powerful combination. Sure, Spider-Hulk loses intelligence, which is kind of Spider-Man's big thing, but it's funny to think of Spider-Man's dexterity and agility paired with the brute force of the Hulk. What if there was a version of Bruce Banner and the Hulk that was just fed up with both Bruce Banner and the Hulk? Well, that's where Doc Green comes in. Thanks to exposure to the Extremis virus, this new version of the Hulk was able to manifest itself and cause a good amount of damage. Doc Green hates to be called either Hulk or Banner, which probably represents some deep-seated self-esteem issues from Banner, and Doc Green set out on a quest to depower all the Gamma mutates, not caring if they were good guys or bad guys. He just wanted them all gone. This version is similar to the Professor Hulk in terms of intelligence and strength, but he definitely has more of an edge when it comes to getting what he wants. So the moral of the story is, don't take Extremis, kids, it's bad for you. Doc Green's ending is both kind of funny and tragic. So Doc Green suffered from losing his intelligence over time, and while he was smart, he made an AI duplicate of his personality. But then that AI duplicate saw that Doc Green's intelligence wasn't as smart anymore and then turned against him. Anyway, I think a Doc Green would be interesting to see in live action because so much of Bruce Banner's and the Hulk's arc has been about them battling with each other, so it would be fascinating to see another personality who's sick of both of them rise up and take control. Sometimes it's just hard to beat the original, right? The standard version of Hulk that we all know and love has gone on some incredible journeys, both in the comics and the MCU. The OG Hulk is normally a gigantic rage monster who gets stronger the angrier he gets. So by that rationale, if there's a villain who keeps fighting him and making him more mad, it's only a matter of time before Hulk will start to overpower his opponent. It's why in the MCU, the top villains really have to knock him out fast, or else he'll eventually overcome everything. Take the Thanos fight, for instance, in Infinity War. That opening scene saw the Mad Titan deliver a brutal beatdown to our Hulk after a brilliant introduction by Loki.
We have a Hulk.
But we know that the Hulk only gets stronger the angrier he gets, so I really think if that fight had gone on longer, the Hulk could have won. Same with his Thor fight from Thor Ragnarok. Thor knocks him out with lightning, but given time, the Hulk would have just gotten so furious that lightning might have just bounced off him. Is that true? Well, I guess now we'll never know. Since the OG Hulk persona has a lot of the same powers as a lot of Hulks on this list, I'll take this time to ask, which Hulk do you think has the best design? Mark Ruffalo, Ed Norton, or Eric Bana? I'll say now that Ed Norton's design is actually really cool, and I wish they would have kept that a bit more rather than slowly turning the Hulk into Mark Ruffalo. But that just might be me. So with the MCU now pivoting to explore the multiverse, it's only a matter of time before we see different versions of some of our favorite characters. Some of them will be heroic, others will be villains, and some will be downright terrifying. That's the case with the ultimate version of the Hulk, who hails from Earth 1610. The backstory of this character has shades of the OG version, but I think it's overall much darker. Basically, that universe's first super soldier, Nick Fury, gathered genetic engineers to attempt to recreate the super soldier serum. A more flawed version of Banner thought he perfected a version of the serum, but didn't want to share it because he thought he wouldn't get credit. So he took it himself, and it resulted in him hulking out. Then later he took things a step farther by mixing the super soldier serum with the Hulk serum and turning himself into an even worse version of a Grey Hulk. Now, this version has proven to not be as strong as his other universe counterparts, but it should be noted that the Ultimate Hulk is way more vicious. He's not just angry all the time, he's unhinged, sadistic, ruthless, and even cannibalistic. So yeah, if I had to choose between meeting the OG Hulk or a cannibal Hulk in a dark alley somewhere, then yeah, I'm choosing the OG Hulk every time. The Devil Hulk is the darker, more sinister version of the Hulk. Basically, how it's explained is that if the normal Hulk is Bruce Banner's inner rage, then Devil Hulk is Banner's inner evil. He's a truly monstrous version that hopefully never gets unleashed on an unsuspecting public. Right off the bat, he's just as powerful as the regular Hulk, but also comes with a few nifty upgrades like increased intelligence, some elemental powers, and even terrakinesis, which is the ability to manipulate terrain and rock formation. He's also just downright terrifying to look at. Eventually, this version of the Hulk was locked away forever, and it made way for the Immortal Hulk. This version is actually content with waiting inside of Banner, and his transformation is limited to nighttime. The Immortal Hulk can also release massive amounts of gamma blasts capable of destroying everything in a nearby area, as well as having the ability to drain gamma from other gamma mutates. He can also sense liars, because it wouldn't be a Hulk iteration without some weird random power, right? There's one version of the Hulk that fans have been clamoring for a long time, and that's Planet Hulk. Mark Ruffalo's version of the character has been incredibly well received by fans that for a long time there was a push to give him his own solo movie. Now, complicated rights issues stop that from ever happening, which is why Hulk is always a side character in movies, but if there was one story that fans would want to see adapted in the MCU, it would be Planet Hulk. In the comics, Hulk is deemed too dangerous to stay on planet anymore, so like any good problem solver, the heroes of Earth decided to put Hulk on a rocket and fly him somewhere else. Of course, things don't go well, and the rocket gets knocked off course, landing on Sakaar instead of the abandoned planet that was the original destination. From there, the Hulk has to work his way up as a gladiator in the rings until he eventually overthrows the whole system and gains control himself. Now, there's two things with this. For one, the Planet Hulk persona is really just OG Hulk, but this whole storyline is probably Hulk's best, so I thought it was worth the mention. And two, yes, we technically already saw this storyline play out in some regard in Thor Ragnarok, and while it was nice to see Gladiator Hulk, it's kind of unfortunate to have seen it all through Thor's eyes, right? And the side storyline means we'll never see a proper adaptation of Planet Hulk in the MCU, and that's kind of a bummer. Maybe a what if episode down the line? Who knows? Don't you just love alternate futures in comics? I do. It allows for things to get quite wild. And one of my favorite and most powerful alternate versions of Hulk is Maestro. Basically, this version lives in a time where nuclear destruction has wiped out just about everyone, including mostly all the heroes and villains. But hey, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, right? The only one that the nuclear war didn't hurt was this version of the Hulk, who only absorbed the radiation and it made him even stronger. And he's not just all brawn either. He's also incredibly intelligent and rules over a land called Dystopia. But really, the reason Maestro Hulk is so high on this list is because of his rockin' white beard. Come on, devastatingly powerful and a thick white beard? It's like a reverse Santa, kinda. Maybe. Anyway, you want to hear something cool about Maestro? He was initially defeated after he was sent back in time at the precise moment when Bruce Banner turned into the Hulk, and the explosion that blasts Banner with gamma radiation is powerful enough to incinerate Maestro. Real circle of life stuff, you know? So I already have mentioned Planet Hulk, but I specifically saved the most powerful version of the Hulk for the end, and it directly relates to Planet Hulk. So by the end of that event, Planet Hulk is happy on his planet with a wife and an unborn son. But then the ship that brought the Hulk to Sakaar in the first place explodes, and everyone that Planet Hulk loves is gone just like that. He's so upset that he absorbs the entire planet of Sakaar's radiation and becomes Worldbreaker Hulk. And can you guess guess what he does? That's right, he breaks worlds. He becomes capable of splitting entire planets with his incredible cosmic power and then sets his sights on revenge, thinking it was Earth's mightiest heroes who planted that bomb. In his absolute rampage, he takes out everyone, including Professor X, Doctor Strange, Black Bolt, Tony Stark, etc. The only one he didn't just wreck was Namor, who specifically voted against sending Hulk away in the first place. So how powerful is he? Well, his stomps cause earthquakes across continents, but even when he's just standing still, he's radiating enough energy to rattle the Earth's core. It truly is the most powerful Hulk of all time, and it's one who I desperately wish we could see in the MCU in some capacity. This video didn't even mention She-Hulk. She's an exciting character on her own, and she looks to have a bright future ahead of her. Will she step up and be the future Avengers' powerful heavy hitter now that the OG Hulk is a bit out of commission? Only time will tell, but that sounds kinda cool, don't you think?